Welcome back. This video is part 4 in a series of missing persons and unsolved murders in South Australia. I share the story of each of these victims in the hope that it may jog someone's memory, or that so much time has now passed that someone may feel comfortable in coming forward with information, no matter how small, to bring closure for the families who so desperately still wait for answers. Each part of the series features around 6 missing people or murder victims. So let's begin part 4. In 1937, at the age of 7, George Duncan emigrated with his parents from London to Australia. He returned to England in 1957 to study at Cambridge University, where he was awarded an MA, a BA, a Bachelor of Laws and a PhD. He taught law at the University of Bristol and published his doctoral thesis in 1971. Duncan returned to Australia on the 25th of March 1972 to take up a lectureship in law at the University of Adelaide, moving into Lincoln College in North Adelaide. Just 6 weeks later, he would be dead. 1972 Adelaide was a time of flared jeans, panel vans and anti-Vietnam protests, when cars still travelled up and down Rundle Mall, and when homosexuality was still illegal in Australia. But rather than arrest gay men for their perceived crime, some South Australian police officers preferred the fun of roughing them up or putting them in the boot of police cars and driving for hours. The banks of the Torrens River was a popular meeting place for gay men at that time, and at 11 p.m. on the 10th of May, a group of policemen came across Dr. George Duncan and his friend, Roger James. In what was described at a later inquest as a bit of a frolic, police tossed the 2 men into the river. George Duncan drowned. Roger James managed to swim away with a broken ankle and was pulled from the river by a Good Samaritan, who then drove him to the Royal Adelaide Hospital. By the time television crews managed to get to the scene, police had already pulled Duncan's dead body from the water. It lay on the bank of the river. In a final act of disrespect, George Duncan's body was tossed back into the river so that the retrieval could be filmed. Roger Jones refused to name the attackers. Witnesses refused to testify, despite then Premier Don Dunstan offering government protection for anyone who would come forward. Within days, word spread that the group of men who killed Duncan were 3 senior Vice Squad police officers, Brian Hudson, Francis Corley and Michael Clayton. The detectives refused to answer any questions when called to the coronial inquiry and were subsequently suspended from duty. The coroner returned an open finding on the 5th of July 1972. Public outrage was so great that Premier Dunstan permitted Police Commissioner Harold Salisbury to call in detectives from New Scotland Yard in London to investigate the murder. Their report, which has never been made public, led to the Crown Solicitor announcing on the 24th of October 1972 that he had decided against proceeding with any prosecution. The 3 accused resigned from the force, and no one was ever held responsible for Dr. Duncan's death. Outrage over the lack of justice and widespread public debate led to a change in legislation, and South Australia became the first state in the country to decriminalise homosexuality. A remembrance plaque was erected at the site of his death, and a memorial service was held at the River Torrens in 2012, 40 years later. The twist in the story is that the Good Samaritan who pulled Roger James from the water and drove him to hospital was Bevan Spencer von Einem, a known member of the infamous family, who were believed to be responsible for a number of rapes, tortures and murders of young boys in the following years. Von Einem was the only member ever named and was convicted of only one of the murders, that of 15-year-old Richard Kelvin. On the 5th of June 1998, 28-year-old Annabelle Strzelecki met with friends at her residence in Clare, approximately 150 kilometres north of Adelaide. She has not been seen since. After Mrs. Strzelecki disappeared, her husband, Wadzimirs, better known as Jim, told police she had left with a man and a woman he had never met before that night. But friends insisted Annabelle would never have left her young children, aged just 5 and 7. The couple married in the Philippines when Annabelle was 19 years old, and Strzelecki, a former opal miner, was 63. They had lived in the Clare area since 1989. Neighbours described Mr. Strzelecki as an odd man, who was extremely strict with his wife and young children, but say Annabelle was a friendly young woman who always wore a brave face. Annabelle withdrew a small amount of cash from a bank the day before she vanished, but never touched the account again. Police searched for her body in waterways and disused mine shafts throughout the area, in a camping spot near Port Augusta and in the couple's backyard. Mr. Strzelecki said publicly he was not sorry she had gone. During an interview with the Advertiser newspaper, he said, "No, I'm not upset. Do you expect me to be the grieving husband? It was not a happy marriage." He would later indicate to someone that he had killed her and disposed of her body in the far north of the state. Unfortunately, police did not have sufficient corroboration to charge and convict him. Despite an extensive investigation, there is nothing to suggest that anyone else is responsible. In a statement Strzelecki provided after Annabelle disappeared, he spoke of the unhappy marriage and provided details of a trip he took with a rental van up to the far north of the state. His story involved him moving the family after Annabelle left. He said he took action to move him and the children, and that he needed a few days away after she left. He also indicated that he went to the Tent Hill area and burned some rubbish. Tent Hill is on the Karawaloo station, about 25 kilometres northwest of Port Augusta. The van was hired in Adelaide on June 9th, and police know that he travelled about 1,700 kilometres, of which a significant number of kilometres are unaccounted for, before it was returned on June 16th. The van was impounded by the police and tested for forensic evidence. Unfortunately, they have never pinpointed exactly where he was during that time, although investigators expended a considerable amount of effort to determine the exact location, including taking a number of soil samples. It is also of interest that the opal mining town of Coobapedy is almost exactly a 1,700 kilometre return drive from Adelaide. On June 20th, 2000, Strzelecki, then 73, was found dead in his home at Clare. He apparently took his own life, along with any secrets concerning Annabelle. SA Police continue to review the case in the hope of finding Annabelle's remains for her children, who are now in their 20s. A reward of up to $200,000 will be paid by the Government of South Australia to anyone who provides information and assistance that leads to the location and recovery of Annabelle's remains. Police believe Peter Stogneff's murder is associated with other high-profile killings commonly referred to in the media as the family murders. Bevan Spencer von Einem, mentioned in the George Duncan case at the beginning of this video as the man who pulled Roger James from the river, is believed to be part of the family network, but it's only ever been convicted for the murder of 15-year-old Richard Kelvin. It was 38 years ago last month that Peter Stogneff was abducted and murdered. In August 1981, 14-year-old Peter decided to play hooky from school and arranged to meet his cousin in Rundle Mall in Adelaide's Central Business District. For whatever reason, his cousin didn't go, and it is not known whether Peter actually made it to the Rundle Mall. On Thursday, the 27th of August, he was reported missing by his parents. Information received during the investigation indicated that Peter may have been seen with a male adult at Tea Tree Plaza on the day of his disappearance. That male has never been identified. It would be 10 long months before they would know what happened to their son, and a parent's worst fears would be confirmed. In May the following year, at a remote property 50 kilometres north of Adelaide, a local farmer was bulldozing bushes and box thorns as part of efforts to clear land adjacent to Middle Beach Road at Two Wells. He returned to the bushes on May 20th and set them alight, with the fires burning for about 2 days. On the 22nd of June, the farmer returned to the area and located a human skull that had been exposed among the debris. He contacted police. Skeletal remains were identified as being those of Peter Stogneff. Forensic evidence that may have established what happened to the teenager after he was abducted had been destroyed by the fire, but remains showed that his body had been cut into 3 pieces with a surgical saw. The use of a surgical instrument to dismember a body was linked to the murder of Neil Muir, another suspected victim in the infamous family ring. It was alleged that Dr. Peter Millhouse, the brother of prominent Adelaide judge Robin Millhouse, had been with Neil Muir in the days before his murders, and prosecutors alleged the manner in which the body was mutilated suggested that it had been done by someone with medical training. Millhouse was charged with the murder, but the case was later dropped. To date, no one has been held responsible for Peter Stogneff's murder. A reward of up to $1 million is on offer to anyone who provides information leading to a conviction in this case. 15 years ago, David Fletcher told his parents he was going for a ride on his new motorcycle. He never came back. He left his parents' home in McGill on November 6, 2004, and his whereabouts remained a mystery for over 4 years, until his skeletal remains were found in the disused Puna copper mine at Moonta on the Yorke Peninsula. He had been murdered, most likely on the day he vanished, then wrapped in a distinctive floor rug. He was then thrown from the edge of the mine, landing in water, where he remained concealed until the water level dropped low enough to finally reveal its secret. While police will not comment on the cause of death, examination of David's remains recovered from the mine in April 2009 revealed obvious injuries to his bones. The investigation into his death has been far from static. Detectives have revealed for the first time that they have a suspect in the case and are continuing to gather evidence. Detective Sergeant George said the location the body was found indicated the killer had intimate knowledge of the area and the strong likelihood that more than one person was involved in the disposal of the body. From where the body was found, we think it was thrown over the edge of a cliff, rolled down the cliff and into the water. It remained there submerged until the water receded in drought conditions, he said. To do that, there is a fence you have to navigate over, which lends more weight to the fact more than one person was involved. David's younger brother, Philip, also believes he knows who was responsible, and it bothers him that the man has not yet been brought to justice. He says there is a lot of circumstantial evidence, but there are just too many coincidences surrounding this one person. When found, David's remains were still wrapped in the distinctive red patterned rug and was wearing a Northridge Rovers jacket. The jacket came from a defunct scout group that was based at Para Vista between 1994 and 2000. If you have any information regarding this case, please call Crime Stoppers or contact your local police. 16-year-old Patricia Susan Schmidt, known as Susie to those who loved her, was sexually assaulted and murdered at Hallett Cove on December 17, 1971. Patricia had just finished work at the Darlington Burger King, now a Hungry Jack's, at 1:45 a.m. It was her second night on the job, and she was waiting for her father to collect her. He was just 10 minutes late. Her battered body was found the next day, laying in grass on the side of Adams Road at Hallett Cove. The last time she was seen by co-workers at the fast food restaurant, Patricia was wearing black lace-up boots, hot pants, a red jumper and an orange coat. When she was found, she was only wearing the boots. The jumper and coat were draped over her body, and her bra was hanging on a wire fence nearby. Traces of weathered pink and white paint were found on her body. There were also traces of different metals, predominantly nickel and nickel silver. At the time, police investigated the possibility that she had been in an engraver's or key cutter's workshop. A kangaroo skin purse she carried was never found. The popular girl had left the restaurant and waited outside. Reports say she stood for a while and then walked around for a few minutes. Inexplicably, she then started walking north along South Road, rather than to the south towards her Seacliff Park home. The previous Tuesday night, after her first shift, Patricia told a girlfriend that she had been walking home when a man stopped and offered her a lift. She described the stranger as old, about 30, not attractive, with pimples and a flash car. As she sat in the car, he suggested driving into the hills. She refused, and he started driving towards Hallett Cove, before finally dropping her at home. Detectives called to the scene said drag marks suggested she was jumped on the verge after being killed somewhere else. She was still wearing gold earrings, a gold watch and silver signet ring. SA Police have renewed calls for information about the murder and say DNA evidence from the case would be going across the Tasman Sea to be analysed in New Zealand. Despite promising leads, police have not had any major breaks in the case. Even though this case is almost 48 years old, someone may have heard something or witnessed strange behaviour from a friend or a family member at the time of Patricia's murder. No matter how small a piece of information may be, call Crime Stoppers or contact your local police. There is a $1 million reward for information leading to an arrest. Thanks for watching, and please remember the family members who are still painfully waiting for any information that may help find a loved one or give them closure in an unsolved case. Until next time.
Murder.
It's the most serious crime.
How would you feel if your friend or relative was a victim?
And the case remained unsolved. No clues, no goodbyes, and sometimes no body.
While the killer continues to live their life.
Never charged, never held accountable.
You would feel angry, helpless, and frustrated.
You'd want justice.
You can help,
If you have any information,
no matter how minor.
ring Crime Stoppers.
See a lawyer.
There's significant rewards on offer.
Please